As you heard earlier, former CIA Director Mike Morell defends the Bush administration leading up to the Iraq War, saying the intelligence community was singing from the same sheet of music when it came to intel on weapons of mass destruction. In a new book, he also concedes mistakes in assessing the fallout from the Arab Spring. And when it comes to Benghazi, well, in one case, he says the administration specifically misled reporters. Another issue he had a problem with in his new book, the Senate Democrats' report on enhanced interrogation techniques.
What I was really reacting to here was the report of the Democrats on the Senate Intelligence Committee that they finished up in late 2013 and which was released to the public just over a year ago. And I was reacting to that because I believe that is one of the most deeply flawed documents that I have ever seen in my 33 years of government service. There are errors of commission and there are errors of omission. There were many discussions in the executive branch. This program was approved by President Bush, approved by the Justice Department, and many conversations with senior members of both intelligence committees, both sides of the aisle, approved this program and in many cases wondered why we weren't doing more.
So when you read that report, what did you think?
I was angry. I was angry that we had a report that was being portrayed as the history of what happened here. And it is far from the history of what happened here. Waterboarding bothers me personally. And one of the things I learned when I studied the program was that the most effective technique was waterboarding. So it becomes a very difficult moral choice, right, of whether to say yes or no to doing it. Choice only a president can make.
In his book, The Great War of Our Time, Morell acknowledges misreading the Arab Spring.
The judgment we made at the beginning of the Arab Spring, and that judgment was, we think, this is the analyst talking now, we think that the Arab Spring is going to undercut al-Qaeda. That turned out to be wrong, right? This turned out to be a huge boon for al-Qaeda.
As the Obama administration was talking about al-Qaeda being on the run, Morell insists the CIA was briefing them that al-Qaeda's ideology was spreading far and wide across the Middle East and North Africa.
We saw that coming. And we told the story as it was happening.
So what happened?
You're asking the wrong guy, Brett.
You know what the administration was saying.
Look, one of the things I do in this book, Brett, is I try really hard not to speak for other people.
Which brings us to Benghazi, Libya. Morell spends 47 pages on it in his book. First, though, a pressing question about what the CIA was or was not doing there. You write that the CIA base in Benghazi did not play any role in moving weapons from Libya to the opposition in Syria, and neither did any other CIA officer or facility in Libya.
Correct.
Were CIA officers tracking the movement of weapons?
Can't talk about that.
Can't talk about it?
Can't talk about it.
Even if they weren't moving the weapons themselves, are you saying categorically that the U.S. government and the CIA played no role whatsoever in the movement of weapons from Libya to Syria?
Yes, we played no role. Now, whether we were watching other people do it, I can't talk about, but we played no role in facilitating the movement of those weapons. Zero, categorically.
In your book, you write that you became so concerned about the security situation in Libya that you actually traveled to Tripoli to meet with the Libyan government.
The U.S. government became concerned about it, and the President of the United States asked me to go talk to the Prime Minister. In the 8 months between your trip to Tripoli and the Benghazi attacks, did you have any conversations with Secretary Clinton or any of her top officials about that deteriorating situation, security situation in Libya? I did not personally. I always did a trip report. When I got back, I sent it to my colleagues on the Deputies Committee. One of those was the Deputy Secretary of State.
How would you compare the physical security at the State Department's compound to the CIA Annex security?
The security at the CIA Annex was far superior to the security at the State Department facility. No doubt about it.
Why does the CIA take the security of its personnel more seriously than the State Department?
Look, there's no doubt in my mind that the State Department facility should have had better security. No doubt in my mind that there was a failure at the State Department. No doubt about it.
And about the CIA analysis of the attack on 9/11/2012? You write in the book that from the very first time that you get a handle on what's happening there. You assess that it's not really an organized attack, that it looks to you from viewing the video that it's somehow haphazard.
The analysts came to an early set of conclusions, yes. There's a lot of things, Bret, that led the analysts and lead me to conclude that there wasn't a lot of pre-planning here. You know, one is what you see happen when these guys come through those gates at the State Department facilities, right? They are much more like a mob than they are an organized military force. Some of them have weapons, some of them don't. They're running by buildings, not into buildings. They're looking thrilled, simply thrilled that they're on the compound. This was clearly not an organized attack. You know, one of the other things that people talk about a lot are these mortars, right? Gosh, 5 mortars, you know, really accurate, right? One of the questions I've always asked myself is, why only 5 mortars? And why only 5 mortars at the last of the 3 attacks? Because all of this, in my view and in the view of analysts, was put together quickly.
You go out of your way to emphasize that you didn't think the crowd likely meant any real harm to the Americans in Benghazi. You say there's no evidence that the attackers were targeting the ambassador specifically or U.S. officials generally when they set that fire or any of the other fires that night, and they did not appear to be looking for Americans to harm.
That's absolutely right. That's what you see on the video.
Okay, the one person who's in custody for Benghazi currently, Abu Khatala. This is indictment for Abu Khatala. It says that the objects and purposes of the attackers in Benghazi were to kill United States citizens at the mission and the annex. It further goes on to report that Khatala and other attackers, quote, intentionally participated in an act intending that lethal force be used in connection with a person other than one of the participants of this offense, and the victims died as a result of this act.
Right.
So in plain language, is the indictment wrong?
So I'm not an attorney. I'm not a Justice Department lawyer. I'm just telling you what the intelligence community's analysis it was and is of what happened there that night. There is no doubt, right, that these guys, and Abu Khatala was one of the ringleaders, right? There's no doubt that these guys ended up killing Americans and need to be brought to justice for doing that, right? What their intent was when they came through those gates, I don't think we know that.
Boy, the indictment seems to think that you know it. I mean, this is the U.S. government's writing. The indictment, why would they include language if, as you claim, there's no evidence that the attackers intended to harm U.S. citizens?
You know, if you read further in the indictment, there's also charges with softer language.
The indictment reports that Khatala and other attackers acted, quote, willfully, deliberately, maliciously, and with premeditation and malice aforethought when they killed Ambassador Stevens and others in Benghazi. The indictment charges that Khatala committed the offenses after substantial planning and premeditation to cause the death of a person and commit an act of terrorism. So I guess, is the indictment wrong?
What I'm saying is that the intelligence community analysts and I have a different view from that.
Have you shared that with the Justice Department? Because they've got to put a case together against this guy.
So they saw the analysis that was put together.
Do you know more than those who wrote the indictment?
I just know what I know, Bret. I don't know if I know more. I just know what I know.
Considering that, do you think they'll have a difficult time convicting Khatala?
I hope that Khatala gets convicted and spends a lot of time in jail for killing 4 Americans.
Morell became a focus of congressional inquiries for changes he made to CIA talking points about the attack.
I never intentionally misled anybody. I never lied to Congress.
At first, the White House said it was those CIA talking points that led Susan Rice to say what she said on 5 Sunday talk shows about the attack, blaming a protest outside the Benghazi compound that was sparked, she said, by reaction to an anti-Islam video. It wasn't until a Judicial Watch lawsuit that another set of talking points in an email surfaced from Obama advisor Ben Rhodes, where that anti-Islam video was mentioned. Do you think the White House politicized those talking points?
I think the line in there that says one of our objectives here, right, on this Sunday show is to blame the video rather than a failure of policy. And as you know, I say in the book that I think that is crossing the line between national security and politics.
But when they talked about that sentence afterwards, after it came out from Judicial Watch, they said that that was not about Benghazi.
Right.
In fact, it was explicitly not about Benghazi. It was about the overall situation in the region, the Muslim world, where you saw protests outside of embassy facilities across the region, including in Cairo, Sana'a, Khartoum, and Tunis.
I don't believe that.
It was about Benghazi.
I believe it was about Benghazi because the second tick in those talking points was something to the order of, we need to bring to justice those people who have harmed Americans. And the only place that happened was Benghazi.
So when the White House talked about that, they were lying.
Lying's a strong word. I didn't believe what they were saying. Were they intentionally lying? I don't know. I don't know. You have to ask them.
You argue that this has been the most politicized thing that you've seen.
Politicized national security issue.
More than Iraq and WMD?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe because it was a little more personal for me. You know, maybe I rise it up a little bit. But yeah, I sure felt that way.
The panel weighs in on the Morell interview next.
Graduated high school in 1989, went to work the very next day, plywood mill here in Fort Ox, Georgia.
Secretary Clinton announced she's going to testify voluntarily before the Benghazi Select Committee. Will you also be testifying voluntarily?
I have not been asked, but if the chairman invites me, I absolutely would.
Are you advising the Hillary campaign?
No.
Will you?
I see myself, Bret, as an intelligence professional, nonpartisan. I worked for 6 presidents, 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats. I worked very closely with a Republican president, George Bush, and a Democratic president, Barack Obama. I am not going to be working for anybody's campaign.
Mike Morell, former acting director of the